Okay, can you folks hear online?
Yep.
Thumbs up. All right. So I think we're ready to go, Stacy and Seth. I could do a quick roll call if you'd like.
Sure. I mean, is it recording for the record?
It is recording.
Yeah,
Yes.
go for it.
Yep. So if you could just answer if you're in person or in the room. Wendy Gerlach.
Present in room.
Josh Seeds.
Present in the room.
Seth Barnes.
Present in person in the room.
All right. Stacy Detweiler.
Present in person.
Amanda.
Present in person.
And Pablo, our newest member. Welcome. Glad you're here. Is it pronounced San Emeterio?
Yeah, San Emeterio, you got it. Yeah,
Okay.
Present in person.
All right. And then online, David Bugney,
Present by video.
Jason Robeson,
Present by video.
and Will Tucker.
Present by video.
Great. Okay. So I don't have a PowerPoint developed for today intentionally to keep this focused. And really the biggest part of the conversation is following up from the meeting that just ended with the joint meeting with IRST, and then also the, if there's time, addressing the questions on the amphibians package. So I think, any questions about the agenda and what we're up to today before? Okay, so let's see here. I think if Emily, does it work for you to stop sharing the agenda so we can see folks a little bit better here? And then I'll just hand it over to you, Seth.
All right. I think the agenda is fairly, it's a lot of wrap up from what we just heard. And then discussion, continuing discussion from this group. We didn't advertise any substantial decisions, right?
No, actually, we did say.
Okay, what did we
for the
say?
amphibians, there's that would be
Potential for.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could wrap up some of the clarifying questions around amphibians and genetics and that sort of thing. And then just sort of any other discussion that's relevant and helpful from what we just heard. So I guess that's probably a good place to start, is around the genetics, including genetics question. Interested to hear where people thoughts are there. So
we can pull up the document if you.
That would be helpful if you could pull up that document and put up question number 1. There's a very interesting sound in the background here. Like, I think there's some sort of weed eater or something going on out there, but.
Yeah, just ignore it.
Will has it. Oh, Will.
Go ahead. Will.
So part of my comment is the fact that it's probably my ignorance. I was using genetics as a hopeful placeholder to help me understand how strong the commingling of the critters were, so that I had a sense of what else is happening around them that might not be directly in the sample site. And so I don't know how to phrase it differently, but I was hoping to understand a little bit about its ability for the critter's ability to move and get across, because as we put in more big culverts, are we creating an environment that creates more walls that we don't know that barriers that they won't cross? Are we damaging that piece? And I was hoping the genetics would give me a little bit of insight. So I'm not hung up on the word genetics, and I'm not hung up on genetics, but I'm looking for a way to understand the diversity and the strength of their ability to move from one location to another. And I don't know how you do it if it's not through some sort of genetic sampling.
Yeah, so we heard that from the IRST. IRST was trying to get us to hone in on the question that we're actually trying to ask. And I think the connectivity was a part of that. And I don't know. overall health, so to speak, I guess, was also, and I think that's connected.
Right, and what I heard them say was both of those questions are not a priori only answerable via genetics. Genetics is a method in terms of answering the question. And to your point, Will, I don't know how to do it either, but that's not the methods is not so important as getting the answer. And leave it up to the bright folks on the IRST and their associated contractors to figure out the methods is my.
So correct.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get across is that I'm not hung up on it being genetics,
Copy.
but for me, in talking about it, genetics seems like such a logical way to get an easy access to it.
I will also say, from my perspective, that, and they touched on this as well. That's not really the crux of the rest of question one. The question one itself, the actual question was about sort of where they are, not about the connection between the subpopulations or whatever. So if that's a question, it's a different, and I think that's valid. I think it is, personally, I think it is a different question than what our question is up there. And we try to sandwich that in with including genetics, and I think it would be cleaner and more obvious what we're asking if that was actually a separate question. If we want to ask that separate question, we do it outside of that first question. So we make sure that first question is clear as much as possible. That would be my, but I'm interested in what other people think too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just,
Stacey.
I was taking some notes while Kelly and others were talking, and I think this sort of idea of we want to understand connectivity, we want to understand persistence, and I think that was kind of embedded in that distribution question, and we were trying to get at it with the word genetics. And so I was curious if either following the model of later in the sentence, we just do parentheses, e.g. genetics, like providing that as an example, like we do for factors and providing it like we did for scale, or if we want to just say distribution and connectivity. And maybe I'm wordsmithing too deep in the weeds here, but it seems like we were aligned on what we were trying to convey. Maybe not. I don't have my
Go ahead.
name anymore.
Go ahead, Amanda.
I don't know, we've got half and half with names and no names over here.
Go you and Pablo's and Wendy.
Okay. I think, I mean, we talked about this a lot, and I was not aligned with some of where everybody else was. And this was the negotiated solution to bring that in, that others that were no's, right, could get on board with, right? So my understanding is that the way, or what I expected, I guess, of the way that this was worded was that the genetics piece was really that, I like kind of how Seth was putting it, kind of the drawing with the crayons, like where are the populations and are there sort of subpopulations within that as it relates to the actual distribution? If we change that word from distribution to connectivity and persistence, that significantly changes the question. So, and that would change how I feel about the question. So I'm not opposed to having genetics in there, such that we, and some of the conversation today, I think, was really important. And maybe it's just defining more what we mean as it relates to genetics, redistribution, right, on the distribution side. So, again, I don't think that we should have all the conversations we had before. I mean, it took us a long time to get here. So, that's kind of where I'm at. So just.
That's helpful sort of reminder, because it has been a while since we talked about this.
Pablo.
I was kind of just hoping for some clarification stepping into this conversation. Maybe that is rehashing the conversations that we've had before. But if it's so, just thinking about it, my question is, is genetics something specifically that this group wanted to look at? Because when I'm looking at the two options that were included as a response, something common that I see is referencing or acknowledging that observation about habitat connectivity. And I think you kind of just talked about that, Amanda. Are we looking at habitat connectivity here, or are we looking more at distribution? And to what extent did this group previously feel genetics was the way to answer that question? Or could there be another method, as was talked about previously, that is not genetics, that would help to answer the same question that we're ultimately trying to get at here?
Wendy?
Yeah, I feel like their response to them and whatever we revise here needs to be responsive to their saying that when they think like a full-blown genetic study is not necessarily necessary, and also be very labor and cost intensive. So I would vote for sort of just keeping the paren and including genetics to the extent necessary to determine population connectivity, but not necessarily a full-blown genetic study. That's rather wordy, but something like that, where we're just saying, by genetics, we do not mean a full-blown genetic study. We need population, information about different populations and how they connect.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, after the conversation with IRST, it's like I along with Julie, who's not here, was one of the people that I thought we needed to include genetics in there. And I think we were thinking of it as the best tool to determine connectedness and like flow between populations. Between like at the small scale populations or subpopulations, are those connected? Is the flow of individuals and genetic information between them? But after the conversation with IRST, then it's a little bit like us telling them methods in this one way. And I feel confident that they're going to pick the right tool when they're doing it, whether that's genetics, which it very well could be for an amphibian connectivity question or not. So my thinking on question one is we could take out the including genetics, and then in the factors where we have like microhabitat conditions at the end, we could also put like, connectivity, microhabitat conditions and connectivity or something like that to get at that we're interested in this idea of our populations connected. Without prescribing methods. I don't know if that meets what other AMC members want or need. But after that conversation, I'm fine with not having the including genetics there. I feel like they will pick that or suggest that if that's the right methodology to use. I would just want to make sure there's an understanding that we're interested in the importance of connectivity between habitats for distribution, right? Because I can have brilliant habitat right here. If there's no way for the squishy, needs to keep its skin moist little creature to get there, then it doesn't matter how beautiful that habitat is if they're not there and they don't have a safe path to get there. So yeah, I don't have a strong feeling on what's the right way to include this idea of connection between habitats for species vitality over the long term and that they can distribute to habitat as it becomes available. Right? It's like, just to the fire question, something can be really good habitat. It has a fire. It's no longer good habitat. It goes through succession for 5 years or so. And now because of all this downed wood created by hail of the fire and having vegetation regrow and it gets moister again, the wood starts to rot. Now it's really good habitat. And so habitat doesn't stay that way forever. It's the whole wilderness fallacy, right? Like it might be a really good spot at the moment in time when we first really cataloged it. That doesn't mean it stays that way forever. And just because something is damaged or unsuitable habitat doesn't mean it stays that way forever. It's always changing and flexing across the landscape over time. And so what matters is the distribution thing, right? Gordon Reeves will talk about this a lot. You have a landslide that wipes out an area. It's terrible for salmon for about 2 years. And then it's really good for them because it's full of wood and gravel. And the salmon just need a way to get there. And so I'm trying to think of the same issue with amphibians. Like, can they reach suitable habitat in addition to what makes suitable habitat.
And I hear where you're coming from, Josh. My only issue in structuring that question one is that I almost think it's a related question, but it's a separate question from what that question one is. And if you just sandwich it in there the way that you're suggesting, I'm afraid what we'll get back from IRST is I still don't know what you mean by that. Like, do you want us to categorize every single one of these, and how connected are those populations, or in general across the landscape, how connected are populations, or are they more connected in some situations than others? There's a
Yeah.
lot to that.
So
That's,
maybe then the connectivity issue is something that we're overcomplicating question one, and we want to get the answers to 1 and 2. And then when we're getting to, okay, why did we get the answers we got to 1 and 2? Then that's like one possible factor.
yeah, and I'm really not at this point, I'm not sure. I'm not saying that that's not a question that we should wrestle with and prioritize. I'm just saying I could see that not really solving their question. If we just move it to a different spot and say it in a slightly different way, I think they still would have the same question. What do you actually want out of that?
To me, analytically, it works to just, because I see the point about the second sentence, not quite. I think including it in factors doesn't quite work for me analytically, but for me, it does analytically work to include it. Just change our including genetics to like including connectivity of different populations across habitat. I think that's an aspect of distribution that we want them to focus on. So to me, it makes sense to put it in a paren where it's currently located.
I'm just playing around with this as you guys talk, because the top one I'm not changing or anything, so you can see the
Yeah.
difference, just wanted to.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Emily. This is actually, I think, helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, Amanda, sorry, I didn't see it.
It's okay, it's okay. Like I said, new format here. I guess for me, that option 2, the way that that's worded with the changes, from Wendy, then I ask, okay, well, what is habitat? What is quality habitat? What are we looking for? How do we define whether it's connected or not, what those aspects, we haven't even defined those things. And I feel like for me, I need to even determine, like, for me, I want to see the trend in the species. Because if the trend is not bad, or the trend is stable, or the new rules are effectively improving the trend, then, I'm rehashing the conversations we already had. But for me, then we're meeting our biological goals and objectives. Is there a biological goal? And I still don't have the biological goals and objectives, which makes it confusing. But is there a biological goal and objective that says to increase the diversity of genetics across populations for amphibian species? Is that something that we're trying to do? Is that something that we are responsible for as landowners and as operators? I don't think so. I understand we had a lot of conversations about how that may contribute to the persistence of the species. But if the trend is good and amphibians are improving, do we need to care about exactly why? Or are we comfortable with rules are effective and we move forward?
On that trend piece, and again, from my understanding, not having been part of these previous conversations, are we looking for a trend here, or is this more like the basic research question to understand what the baseline is initially before then moving on to maybe more of a monitoring and trend aspect to it? What are we trying to
Those
get?
question 2 is the trend question.
Yeah, this is I think that's what you're getting at, right? That this is the baseline sort of question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is it, again, just trying to integrate what we heard from Iris T and maybe get to what you're saying, Amanda, are we interested in sort of baseline of distribution and population diversity. That I get us closer to. I don't know, because that's
Yeah.
not saying necessarily like, are they connected or not, but it's just understanding,
Yeah.
again, this is not my area, so.
Well, and that's where, to me, it's sort of like, and maybe we get more specific around distribution, sort of that, like, alpha versus beta versus sort of gamma, right? Like, population dynamics. So, like, you have the kind of the broad distribution, and then are there sort of subpopulations, you know, and that's where you kind of need the DNA genetic information. And we had a lot of conversation about that and some of the benefits there, and having some of that baseline information, you could go and get more information about that. So if that's, you know, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that, and I thought that's basically what we were trying to have them do with the distribution connected to the genetics. But then when we start bringing in like habitat connectivity and all these other things, that's when I get a little bit more concerned about what that even means, right?
What if you, in that green spot, what if instead of that wording you had, what was it you just said?
Population diversity.
Population
was
diversity
what
or
Kelly
something like
was-
that, yeah.
It works for me.
Or maybe even not even there, maybe it actually should be down on what factors. Well, it's not really
No,
factors in
it's a
determining distribution.
factor, though.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's,
Yeah, all those factors are like
Yeah,
habitat.
yeah, habitat factors, right. For each of the covered amphibian species, the distribution, including population diversity.
That is part of the distribution.
Yeah. That seems closer and not divergent from the original concept.
Right, while not prescribing
Right,
the method.
right.
The IRST.
You could gather genetic information. In fact, you'll likely gather genetic information.
Yeah, I mean, what other way would you develop, would you determine population diversity without, I mean,
Otherwise, you're looking for tiny morphological differences.
yeah.
In the population scale, which is at this point, a lot more tedious to measure than.
This one's slightly slimier than that one,
Yeah.
that must be different.
Right, yeah, or like average middle toe length. I mean,
Right.
seriously, it's like really fine stuff.
How sociable they are.
Yeah, social.
So just to throw out a thinking question, this is, you're wrestling with what is a good question here? And if we were to do this at a separate meeting, would there be value to having somebody like Jessica or some other amphibians knowledgeable person here, not saying yes or no, this is the right question, but hey, is this sort of a solid question? And I'm not looking for an answer necessarily so much as to brainstorm about the other part of the conversation from earlier about what might be a good way to help you folks address some of the things they talked about. So just, that's a little bit of a tangent, but
I do think when it comes to that whole conversation about making a good research question, I think that inherently this body is not set up to create the perfect research question.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's okay. I think honestly, if you take any one of us and swap them for one of them, they're gonna come over here and they're gonna also produce a question that's not the best question in the world. Because of the diversity of this group, and that's okay. I think that's by design, honestly. And so it's that back and forth, I think we can work at ways to try to make it more efficient, and I think that's useful. And I think the dialogue between the two committees could help that to make it more efficient and less sort of the back and forth and black and white wordsmithing. But I don't want to get us too caught up in trying to make perfect research questions out of this group, because I just don't think that's going to be a good use of time.
Agreed, I agree.
I agree. I feel like what I'm saying is like, just we can have even a rougher product and just get feedback on what makes it good from the
Yeah.
IRST earlier.
And I think we recognize, honestly, I think we do have some scientists in this room that are helpful. Julie, Josh, there's others that have some science background, even Stacy, right? That we recognize when our question is not a perfect scientific question. But it's good enough for us to get you know, we can all align around a question and if we can align around a question and get approval from this group, then I think that's a pretty good day. And then we can get it over there and we have this back and forth and we can land it in the spot that we can make it researchable. I think that's good. Great.
My card in, because I think that's a good solution. I think that gets to what we're trying to figure out, the diversity of the population. And we're not determining a method, so I would say that that's a good change.
Thank you, Amanda.
I have maybe a different potential solution. One of the things that was commented on in the other room was, you know, if the best way to get at this is genetics, right? Then we're talking about every covered species, right? Every covered amphibian species, which I think there's 5 or 6, something like that. So versus question 2, which we're asking about population trends of just the Columbia and Southern Foreign Salamander, getting more specific as related to the PFA report that said that we, you know, really should have some focus on those 2 species. Would it be better to include this genetic piece in that question where we're trying to understand population trends? Because that's more of a, you know, it's kind of more focused around populations, because the way that I think about it, as they're, you know, as all the scientists were talking about genetics, you know, it kind of gets to that health, the persistence, the health of the species. And then there are questions around climate change and wildfire. And, you know, we had some conversations about that fungal disease that's affecting these amphibian species as well. So, you know, in some ways, this population or the population diversity and the genetic diversity and the genetic sharing is more of a population trend question to me than a distribution question. I don't know if it makes more sense.
Those 2 things are inherent. Like that, like their population and their ability to distribute themselves across the landscape are kind of limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you don't just have one population growing in one place. There's always interchange between them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an interesting proposal. You're basically saying,
two species versus.
right, you're basically saying, should we do that here or should we do that in question 2? Or we hone in on 2 species?
Is question 2 focused on the?
You want to scroll down to
Yeah.
question 2, Emily?
My
Yeah,
recollection.
It is.
Question 2 is focused on the torrents.
It is, yeah.
There it is. What's the population trend of the Columbia and Southern torrent salamanders over time on land subject to the Forest Practice Act?
Because then it's also more focused on where the Forest Practice Act is applied to versus the question up above. That's sort of like kind of irrespective of land ownership, where do these things exist? And if we start to get information about habitat connectivity, population connectivity, that includes lands that we have no control over under the Forest Practice Act. In some ways, that's why I was just kind of looking at this and thinking maybe it makes more sense to be in 2 based on the conversation we had.
Wendy?
Yeah, I feel like I would tend not to want to revisit the basic question structure because we did have a bigger group discuss these questions at length. They came up with these 2 and been asked for clarification about question 1. And I think that, like, in looking at my notes from our prior conversation, we had a pretty strong consensus. Like Julie said, knowing the movement of populations will help determine necessary protections. And, you know, to me, like, the issue of connectivity is pretty critical, and I think it belongs in the distribution one rather than the trend of 2 species. So I would argue in favor of just changing the first question.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, I guess somewhat similar to Wendy. When I look at question 1, I think in part it's an effort to kind of build up that baseline of information. That is in part why it's a 25-year HCP for amphibians and not 50. So I am interested. I think this question brings value in even though we're prioritizing some of the species in our later questions, to do what we can to kind of get that baseline information, I guess, and that would be my interest in keeping the question one closer to what it is now.
Okay. Anything online? You guys are kind of quiet. Jason, anything to add into here?
I don't have anything to add. I actually like the inclusion or the change to including population diversity. I think it's a nice balance. Appreciated Wendy's comments on that.
Dave, Will?
So it covers my desire to include and understand more baseline information and about its diversity. So I'm happy with the change. Don't know what else to add.
Thanks.
And same for me. I prefer, I mean, the first question deals with distribution, the second one with trends. And this second option for question one is fine with me.
All right, sounds like we have general agreement. Amanda, I know you were leaning more towards putting it in question two. What are
Yeah,
your?
I mean, the whole time I've been sort of opposed to the genetics piece to begin with, so I don't think I'm really far off of
Yeah,
where I was at, but then,
okay,
I mean, for what it's worth.
okay. It seems like we have general consensus. Should we vote on it?
Yeah, so I did, it's emailed you the draft motion, that same email?
Yes, I'll bring that up.
So the language probably needs, yeah, so it's really just number one that's was edited.
Well, I did a Google AI search. Population diversity. I am not a scientist here, you guys, so I don't really know. But this is very interesting. It says that, that population diversity, right? Is that what we used
Yes.
there? Would have to establish population size through methods like mark recapture or estimates from genetic data. Then compare it to genetic diversity, which is assessed using molecular markers such as microsatellites or mitochondrial DNA to measure genetic variation within or between populations. Population diversity focuses on the number of populations, while genetic diversity measures the variety of genes present. So it looks like population density is maybe more what we're at.
Diversity, you said density.
Diversity. Yeah. So population diversity focuses on the number of populations, while genetic diversity measures the variety of genes present. I don't know if that's helpful for anybody, but it is more information than I had before.
Go back to the actual question for Smith.
Yeah, I'll have to.
But it sounds like all of them require a geneticist.
Yeah, I would imagine this will require them to determine what is a population, right?
Population diversity can be, that's diversity among populations. It can also be diversity within
Within
populations. So as usual, AI got it,
somewhat, right?
somewhat right. I think this is fine. Yeah. If we're ready to move to a motion, I would I'd be happy to make the suggested motion.
Did you make a motion?
I'm making the motion, yeah.
I will second it then.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Using Emily and Terry's language.
Yep, we have a motion and a second, as wordsmith here. Any discussion, any further discussion? All right,
Could we put it up on the screen one more time for me?
The question,
Yeah,
I am trying to do this as.
I know
quick
you're
as
editing
possible.
as we were working, but I would like to.
there it is, as written in bold, question one. And in sort of green, or maybe it's yellow on your screen. The addition, we're striking the term including genetics, and instead we're putting including population diversity.
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 Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, one question I have, I'm trying to channel my inner scientist. Do you think to the point, Josh, that you brought up around, multiple species and that kind of population richness sort of piece versus within one species, because of how it's worded, would we want to amend it to say including population diversity for each individual species?
Well,
Would that be
there's
confusing?
that clause at the beginning that says for each of the covered amphibian species.
Yeah.
Would sort of imply we're gonna get like one.
For each of them.
Okay,
Yeah, the question that follows
Okay.
for each of the covered amphibian species, we should get this separately. for
Okay.
each of the-
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
if that.
if that comes back around, we can make that clarification, but because of that
It's-
initial clause, it should
Mhm.
convey that.
Okay,
Yeah, so if they ask that again, if they come back and ask that, we're not talking about diversity amongst multiple species. We're talking about
Within a person.
within a population
Yeah.
per species, what is the diversity of? Yeah. Okay. Good clarification. Any other discussion? All right, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Seth Barnes,
Yes.
David Bugby,
Yes.
Stacy Detweiler,
Yes.
Wendy Gerlach,
Yes.
Pablo Santa Materia,
Yes.
Jason Robeson,
Yes.
Josh Seeds,
Yes.
Amanda Sullivan Astor,
yes.
William Tucker.
Yes.
All right, that's 9-4-0 opposed, 1 is absent.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That was useful. All right, so transitioning now, we have, in just a time check, we have till 2:15, so we have about 20 minutes. The next question was really around, could you pull the amphibians questions back up and go to question 2? And it's this idea of quantifying or categorizing disturbances, so natural disturbances, wildfire, climate change. I don't know, if we would want to, I mean, they said et cetera, right? I think they did anyway. So that would also, I think, include large scale wind events or other disease or outbreak, insect outbreak, whatever else, ice storm. So there's question 2. And where is their question?
Down below under B.
And
Okay.
that's such as, which kind of mean the same thing as instead.
Yeah. Are there any specific broad scale disturbance or factors that should be integrated into this research question, such as impacts of wildfire, climate change? So in following up with Jessica and Kelly after the meeting, I just kind of pulled them both aside, asking about this one, because it wasn't clear to me what their recommendation was here, and how important it is that we categorize these things. And what I got back from them is they both felt like, in general, not that they get to decide, but I said, how important is it that we categorize, or what they say, that we sort of integrate that, and they said it's pretty important, or it'll be a second question. Like, if you don't put that in the first one, we'll tell you what the population trends are, but then there'll be, confounding, there'll be another question that'll be, okay, why? Or what are some of the factors that may have, led to that? I think it's important that there's probably also, so there's, as they say, man, this is really hard to read for me.
Are there any specific broad scale disturbances?
Broad scale disturbances, or factors. So embedded in that could also be like, for example, splash dams, or, burning, like clear cut burn, large swath, areas, stuff that happened, historical forestry practices that were, so I don't know to the extent that stuff would also be categorized here.
That's pretty hard to, it's a little more challenging to do.
Maybe,
Something
but
from-
the splash dams are not necessarily, I mean, I know that they have some of that there's been some recording or effort to understand where those were, and how, and those definitely had impacts on populations of all sorts of species, as well as, existence of large wood and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot to that question, is, I guess, but it's, and I'm not sure, so, others, thoughts?
It's kind of, so, I don't know if it's an appropriate response from the AMC, but, and we should say, do what you think is scientifically valid and sensible, right? Like, the point that I think Sean Gordon made was, and I think Jessica made it as well, which is that it's like, when do you start measuring, right? If tail frogs dipped after the 2020 fire, you start measuring in 2022, and then you're gonna say, oh, well, the new forest practices are causing this huge increase in tailed frog populations, when it's really not, because if you go back farther, it was like, oh, they got hammered by the fires, and now they're rebounding, and we know they're rebounding because habitat's recovering in the post-fire period due to succession. We can't, one way or the other, make a determination of what the change in forest practice rules are on that, unless we also are looking at tailed frogs in a lot of other places. And then we see, okay, we have this, and then, just like as a purely hypothetical, oh, we have a slight increase in tailed frog populations in areas that didn't burn. And we have a much bigger rate of increase in areas that did burn, but a lower population level, or something like that. And so, and they might come across other things while looking at this. So I don't know if it's an appropriate answer or not, and maybe we get to make up what's an appropriate answer, but it might just be, if these are relevant, factors or confounding influences, that, yes, please make use of them or account for them or something like that. But, they might come up with other things that are also important. That, do they need to come back to us, or is it their job as the science panel to say, hey, here's what's important for measuring trend, and so we're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of a question of like, well, is about the line and the roles. We're setting the general question, maybe like the specifics of what needs to go into answering the question is not our place.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, at what point did we ask the question enough? And from there, we hand it over.
We trust them.
Yeah, and you guys, you don't need to get every detail of how you answer every question approved
Yeah.
from us, but did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
And then Wendy, go ahead.
agree with Josh. I think that approach makes sense to me. The other idea in kind of modeling the similar structure from question one, if we wanted to, we could ask another question or a sub-question that is sort of just asking, like, what are the factors that determine or impact population trends for these species? That's a little bit a step beyond, that is a step beyond what you were saying, Josh, and I like your suggestion. But if we wanted to be more specific and have them look into that and speak to those factors, we could call that out.
Wendy,
Yeah, I have an idea that is sort of consistent with what people are saying. I was thinking maybe we could respond something like, we intend the primary focus to be the trend going forward. To the extent the IRSD sees significant other broad scale disturbances or factors such as wildfire or climate change that the IRSD feels should be integrated, please address this as a secondary factor. So we can just kind of use their language, just because I think they were basically saying in today's meeting that they thought those things were relevant. But we could say that we still want the primary focus to be on the trend going forward, but as a secondary matter, ask them to let us know if there are significant other disturbances that they could report back on. Because I kind of like the language in their question 8, and we just reuse that in our answer to them.
B, you mean? I think that's a B.
Yeah.
It is hard to see though.
Yeah, it's, I'm squinting.
Yeah, if you can zoom in at all.
Yeah.
I know we'll
Or
lose.
make it a little darker.
Yeah, it is. It's really light.
Maybe.
Not make it. It's.
Part of it.
Can you zoom in one more, like click down below? Didn't change.
Oh, no, I already zoomed in.
Oh.
Okay, it's a little better.
One more. Can you click one more? There we go. That's better.
Yeah, the problem is then.
You can't put as much on the screen.
Not like to having to stay on.
The MC want to first.
And I was suggesting we use the word significant in there because that gives them some discretion. It's if they think it's a minor aspect, then they can at their discretion not focus on it as a secondary focus.
Yeah, that's good. Leave it there. That's
There we
good.
go. I got it all together.
So as I read this question, I really like the way we wrote it in the first instance, and I agree with you, Josh, that it doesn't say one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so it almost gives them, like, if they think that's important, they can add that in there. Like, it just says, what is the population trend of the Columbia torrent salamander over time on land subject to the Forest Practices Act? So if they came back to us and said, here's the population trend, and it is important in that trend is also the existence of, wildfires on the landscape that have had an impact over time, and windstorms or whatever. I don't see how that would be outside of the question that we asked.
I agree. I like our question. We could maybe just informally send them the information back that we stick with our original question, but as a secondary focus, if they see significant other disturbances or factors, please integrate them in the research.
And we're almost like turning it around to them. They're asking, are there any specific broad scale disturbances or factors? We could say, I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah.
So, and if there are, tell me what those
We
be.
would just be changing, we wouldn't be changing our question, we would just
Yeah.
be changing our answer
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
their clarifying question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
And I guess another way to think about it is you're not dictating how a question needs to be answered. Ultimately, there's a whole series of scientific things like controls and statistical power and all these things that go into getting a quote unquote good response. And it's kind of not ENPC's
Yeah,
business.
I would leave it them leave it to them to debate amongst themselves which factors, if there are factors that should be categorized and as they come up with that are broad scale disturbances that should be important to be noted along with the population trend. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of gets back to some of the conversations we had today about the IRST making assumptions of what we want. And if we don't provide enough detail, then they will make assumptions.
Yeah.
And they will add more detail into the RFP in order to provide the detail necessary for the researchers to do the research. So I do think there is something to us being clear about what our expectation is. So for instance, if our expectation is that the researcher and within the RFP, the researcher would be teasing out and contextualizing any noise that they find in the data associated with specifically around disturbance events. If we want that included, I think we should be very clear in saying that and not assume that that's what they will do and how they will word it. Right? I mean, that.
Well, what we are asking, so what you just had up there, Emily, contextualizing, can you hit the reverse? You had
No,
something.
no, I put it down here so that we
Okay.
have both. So the top one is what you guys had before, and then I wrote this one.
Research that are, please integrate disturbance or factors into the research that are relevant for contextualizing population trends. So what we're asking for is the population trend. And what they're wondering is if we want something contextualizing that population trend. And I guess the first question that we should answer for ourselves, and I think what you're asking, is do we want something contextualizing population trends?
To me, that's kind of just expansive and a bit unclear, to be honest. To me, I would feel it was clearer myself in terms of looking for clarity, to stick with our original question and then answer in the response to the AMPC, just change our response to say that we say yes as a secondary priority to what is in B up there, i.e. if there are factors that should be integrated, they should do that. I mean, to me, like the word contextualize is beginning to be a little bit vague and then seemed to I was just getting confused in there. I thought it was taking us to a place that was more confusing than when we were before.
I guess this is Amanda, and I guess I'm just trying to respond to what the really good kind of points that Becky was making around, and Josh kind of alluded to as well in the beginning of this conversation, that if our charge here is to analyze the effectiveness of forest practice rules, we can't do that if disturbances are impacting the way that these species are responding. In order to tease out if the forest practices are doing something good, bad, or indifferent, you sort of have to consider these other things. And this other noise in the trend data. So, and I thought that was really helpful for me to understand the importance of it. And again, given the conversation that Seth and Stacy had with Jessica and Kelly, it sounds like they also feel like it's really critical. So, maybe contextualizing is not the right word, if that's the word that seems to be too vague for you, Wendy, but I would agree that personally, I would not want what we're doing in the woods to look good or bad based on something that I had no control over and then being attributed to that.
But I would think that just what they put as doing that, integrating large, broad scale disturbances or factors, wouldn't that meet your requirements if they did that? That seems to be almost clearer and more directive than having a statement about contextualizing.
So what you're saying
If we
is that
said yes to their B, wouldn't that cover what you're talking about in terms of seeing population declines that are due to something other than forest practices? Like, I would think it would. address your.
If we just say
If we just answer the
yes.
question, yeah.
Yes.
We
We didn't change the question, we just say yes
Yeah.
to B.
I guess, yeah, then the question would be,
Which
how
one?
would they want us to do
Well,
that?
yes, and that's your prerogative to figure out what's,
To do that?
yeah, what's the right
Yes. that's
way
what
to
we
do
like.
that.
Yes, we
I mean,
recognize
just
that these.
just to make it clear,
needed.
this is not the MPC's role to be in those particular weeks.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think just to please do so as you deem necessary.
Yeah,
It's good.
I
yeah,
would be fine with that.
I mean,
Yes, please include as necessary or as prudent.
when I think for me, this is
I
where,
like that.
this
Just
is,
this. Okay.
Yeah, short and sweet.
Yeah,
Should I just get rid of the rest then?
yeah.
Yes. Okay.
yeah, I guess not, one question I would have is around climate change and what that actually means.
That is one that's kind of interesting because it's not it can result in a broad scale, impact, climate change, but that's usually called a drought, or it could be a monsoon.
Yeah,
Right.
It's like, I can think of like a half dozen
Right.
ways that
Yeah.
climate change would modify, including wildfire.
Right, including
Yeah.
wildfire. So,
And
but
so it's
climate
like-
change
Yeah.
isn't necessarily.
And MC is not the right place to try to untangle
Yeah.
what that influence is.
Yeah,
right?
but should we clarify like broad scale? Like,
Yeah,
kind of like a stochastic disturbance or some other
Mm-hmm.
like way to describe that isn't this like kind of global phenomenon?
no, I think just let them do it. Honestly,
I mean, I know for a
Otherwise,
fact
we're
I
talking
put
about
here to
changing-
be very specific.
yeah, I
in
think
that.
otherwise we're talking about changing the research question itself. And what they're just asking is, can we look at
Jason has his hand up.
other factors? And I think the answer is just yes.
Jason?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can go with very clean language here. Please include as necessary, or I could even say, please include impacts such as wildfire or other related types of events or something like that, where you can get some specificity, but once again, you're just coming back to a very clean question.
We could also communicate, or we could try to write it here and just not in the question itself, but in our response. It does seem like it would be useful to communicate in some way that like, be useful if these were events that people could wrap their arms around and not sort of a nebulous climate change. But what, like the event itself, whether it's a wildfire or drought condition or or an ice storm or, climate change can result in all of the above, right?
That could be like a question in and of itself. How is climate change affecting these populations, right? And that could spin off into like a million other things, right? I don't think we're asking them for that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
So
that
then,
looks good, Emily.
please include it as necessary with emphasis on specific events, example, wildfire, drought, ice storm,
I like that.
etc.
Yeah.
Or you got it with example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. That looks good to me. And I can't remember, did we make these responses? I think we did a vote in the past, so
Yeah.
we could do that. Is there a motion? I guess before I cut this off completely, I'm hearing pretty good consensus around this. A lot of nods around the table, nods on the screen. Okay, all right. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Jason made the motion, second.
I'll second, Steve.
Go for it, Wendy.
Wendy
Okay.
seconded. Any discussion, further discussion? Not hearing any. Go ahead and call the roll, Terry.
Sure, and we'll just use this, basically the same motion as before, but modified to answer to be
Yeah,
modified.
B, yeah,
So roll call, Seth Barnes,
yes.
David Bugney,
Yes.
Stacy Duckweiler,
Yes.
Wendy Gerlach,
Yes.
Pablo San Emeterio,
Yes.
Jason Robison,
Yes.
Josh Seeds,
Yes.
Amanda Sullivan Asper,
Yeah.
William Tucker.
Yes.
Passes 9-0 with one person absent.
All right, we have no time. We've got an extra 3 minutes. I did, so as co-chairs, we'll talk more about this with the co-chairs of the IRST. I do think that this was a helpful interaction. We do have a couple of things that we wanted on the agenda that didn't end up being there, that would be maybe follow up for a future meeting, get a compliance monitoring presentation and some other stuff that I think would be useful for a joint meeting. But in general, I think the idea, I agree with everybody in there that we should do this kind of interaction a little bit more often than every 2 years. So we can talk about and bat that around as co-chairs. If you guys are comfortable with that, bring back a suggested timeline or into our calendar. So.
Thank you. Thank you, co-chairs and Carrie and Emily and everyone else who's worked on this, because it was a good meeting and it was a lot of work putting it together. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome.
Anything else, Terry?
Nope.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
I, that part of the.
All for the.